Hello?
Yeah, hello. Good evening, Your Highness, and welcome to Ringtone. It's a collaboration between Ndiela Ngwe and the Ngwe Newsroom, NNR. So we are happy to welcome you into this program.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mbecha Mafua Fontem.
Thank you too. Our discussion today is on the topic of inculturation. This is something that a lot of people talk about, but few people know exactly what it is or understand what is going on with inculturation. So we felt that in your personality, you are standing in both worlds. First of all, you are a traditional authority in Nweland, in Lebang, most precisely, and also very close to the Focolare Movement, who are at the forefront of evangelization in Nweland, in Libialem division. And you are also involved in their activities, trying to introduce this inculturation into our area. So we thought you are the best resource person to reach out to. So in a nutshell, what would you say inculturation is?
Well, I'll make an attempt to say what I know and what I do, particularly as I belong to the Focolare Movement. The Focolare Movement is a movement that has a school of inculturation and practices inculturation. To answer this question, what inculturation is, maybe I will embarrass you by first saying what inculturation isn't.
That is very good. Right on.
So, inculturation is not bringing contribution into the church.
Right.
Many people think like that, but it isn't. From what Mama Tiara, the founders of the Focolare Movement, made us understand, inculturation is studying the culture of the other in order to understand what is positive, what is alive in the other person, which is both supernatural and human, so that we can engraft the gospel message on what she calls seeds of the word already existing in the culture.
Okay.
In this way, the gospel message can be better understood. It is an interior attitude of incarnation. Incarnation. And the master of that incarnation is the Holy Spirit.
Okay.
Kiara tells us that when we live the gospel in an authentic way, in a radical way, we can understand different cultures from within us, from within.
Okay.
So that's what we in the Focolare Movement understand by inculturation. These seeds of the word that Kiara talks about are those beautiful things that exist in the culture. Those beautiful things that when you study them, you will understand how God manifests himself to that culture.
Okay, not cutting you short, but I just wanted to interject here that the Focolare Movement is a congregation within the Catholic Church, which was authorized by the Pope to function within the structures of the Catholic Church. But also, I wanted to add that inculturation is not only the idea of the Focolare Movement, because it was introduced by Pope John Paul II, who is now a saint. And the idea, as you say, was to improve the way that evangelization was being done in the churches, in the communities where the Roman Catholic Church was preaching. So the Focolare Movement, if I understand you and I may rephrase you, is at the forefront of implementing this church doctrine within especially the Nwe area where they are very actively involved. Am I right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
That's what the Focolare Movement does in the Nwe area.
Okay. And if we may go down now to the crux of the matter, I would like us to look at the different ways in which the Focolare Movement and the Catholic Church are implementing this inculturation. And I would like us to be a bit systematic so that we can understand how the Church is trying to do a comparative analysis of what exists in the Nwe culture that is compatible with Christian doctrine and teaching, which could then help them to engraft Christianity into the Nwe society. So we may want to look at things like our world views, our sacred objects, our rites and rituals, our practices, our sacred music, and sacred spaces. So I'll just leave that out to you. If you may want me to take one step or the other, or if you want to just treat them in general, you are free to go on.
Okay. I would like to make you understand that even before the coming of the Focolare Movement, there was inculturation somehow in the Catholic Church.
Okay.
You are from Nwe, and maybe you were still very little when the foundation stone of Mary Heart of Africa Hospital was being laid. At that time, the then Bishop of Nkomsamba, I think it was at that time, Bishop Alben Dongmo came.
Yeah, he was from Nkomsamba.
Yes, he came with Bishop Jules Peters of Boya, with Kiara, and to the greatest surprise of our people, during the Mass, in Thanksgiving, they saw Bishop Ndongmo take our musical instruments called bechet. That was at the end of Mass.
Yeah.
And he shook them and sang the multiple birth songs, what we call a say.
Yes.
And people were very astonished because before that time, those who came first to evangelize us, and they were mostly Dutch priests, had made us understand that say was a bad dance.
Okay.
And the catechists at that time made our old mothers who were Christians and who attended the dance the previous night on a certain along, when then the priest came to visit Beleu, they would go to confession. They didn't know how to speak English, and they went to confession through the intermediary of the catechist, and the catechist would translate for them Abingo Satan dance, meaning they went, they attended a say dance.
They attended a say dance, which was the dance of the devil.
That's right. But then, during this inauguration of the hospital, our people were so surprised to see that it was the bishop coming from the Francophone area. And of course, let me tell you that the Francophones seemed more advanced in inculturation than us. They saw him shake our rattles and intone a say, and people answered in church, and
let me interrupt you here.
Yes.
I understand Monsignor Alben Dongmo is from somewhere around Chang, which means
yes, he is from Chang. He's from from Chang in Poto.
In Poto, which means
yes,
our cultures are basically the same. And if he spoke, most of our people would have understood him. So,
of course.
yes. So I mean that, but Julius Peters was white, and the priests who had come were all white. Could it also be that his knowledge of the indigenous cultures contributed to this engagement that he did with the local population?
Certainly. What I want to tell you is that in order to successfully inculturate, you have to know your tradition and your culture very well. Exactly. And you have to know your Christian doctrine very well. You cannot know your tradition only a little bit and then know your Christian doctrine fully and think that you can inculturate. Okay. You have to be a master of your tradition and know the Christian teachings very well. Then you can successfully carry out inculturation. And I think this is where many people think that what I do in the way of trying to bring people in our own area, foreigners in our own area, to understand this thing about inculturation. People think that I am doing quite a lot, and they sort of hail me for doing it. Only because I know a little bit more about our tradition than the people who grew outside our area. Yes.
Yeah, so Your Highness, let's now go deep now into some of the areas where it's good you already introduced us into it with the Bishop Dokmo story. So let's go further into other areas of our tradition that you have been able to study in collaboration with the members of the Focolare Movement and have been able to see how it could help in evangelization.
Yes. Before we go to that, let me, first of all, remind you that in the year 2000, during Kiara's last visit to our land, she launched the new evangelization.
Yes.
You see, Kiara had studied the Bangwa people through making herself one with Fon de Fang, as she always called the Fon of Fontem, who was ruling at that time. And Kiara knew that our system, that we have a lot of reverence for our chiefs and our notables. So she then drew up a 30-point study of the gospel, taught and empowered the Fon who was ruling at that time, the Fon of Fontem Jifwa.
Yes.
And then he told the Fon of Fontem Jifwa that he was going to be the one to invite the people to come together in order to study the gospel. Yeah. Because the first time that Kiara came, she gave us physical things. We didn't have a road. We didn't have a college. We didn't have a church. We didn't have a carpentry. Kiara gave us those things. Those things were the things that satisfied the body.
Yes.
So this was now her second step, that no, man does not live by bread alone. So Kiara knew that, that's right, that it was time for her now to make our people understand that life just doesn't end here. And our people know that life continues away from the earth.
Exactly.
And if life doesn't end here, we should be struggling also for where we are going to be in eternity.
Exactly.
So that's why she thought that it was good for us to know the New Testament, to know the Gospels. And she launched the new evangelization. And the first points of the new evangelization was the study of the 10 Commandments.
Okay.
And you know, of course, the 10 Commandments are engraved in the hearts of everybody. God engraved them in our hearts.
Exactly.
So you don't have to go to school before you know that you should not steal, you shall not kill, and all that.
Exactly. In our traditions, we had laws which laws against adultery, laws against stealing, laws against killing.
Certainly.
I mean, every aspect of the 10 Commandments, we already had laws either as a common law that everyone understood, or as rules that were set by the community, and everyone followed.
That's right. That's right. And so, Kiara found a core group, a number of us Christians, and she called us the pillars of the new evangelization.
Okay.
And whenever there was a topic for the new evangelization, we had to go into our culture to look for seeds of the word. If we could find seeds of the word that strengthened that aspect of the new evangelization that we were teaching.
Exactly.
For example, we would come out with what showed that the Bangwa people believed in the omnipotence of God. For example, the way we named our children.
Yes.
You have names like Ndamalua. Ndamalua Lakomba Mabap.
Yep. We have Ndamazra.
That's right. Ndamazrabenubechem. Ndamatabem.
We have a
Tendembo. Etuendem. Bandindem. All of these show the omnipotence of God.
Exactly.
And so, what the gospel teach can be engrafted on that.
Exactly.
And then we also had sayings or proverbs. Sometimes you say, we say in our language, "Ona sidanwo ozi sidnyezo," which means do unto others what you would like them to do unto you.
Exactly.
And that is what we call the golden rule, because it exists in every religion.
That's it.
And then we brought our sayings about reconciliation. How do we do reconciliation? There is no house without a problem. But once there's a problem, how do we reconcile? When we are having to celebrate someone's life, don't we often call people to come together and we iron out if there have been problems within the family before we celebrate somebody's life? And this is what St. Paul says: if you are bringing your gift to the altar and there you remember that someone has something against you, leave your gift there, go back
and reconcile,
then come and offer your gift. So we have all these things that are beautiful in our culture, and when we bring them out, those who are foreigners within the land, they are able to engraft the rest of the gospel message onto it.
So, and then just to interject here before you go on. So, what I see here from the examples you are raising, it ties in with the idea that it tries to take away the idea of primitivity, which the first missionaries thought was part of African culture, such that now you embrace African culture with an openness of mind, to realize that you are dealing with people who are human beings. They have the capacity to think, they have the capacity to invent, to create, and they have the capacity to question their environment and to relate with God. Such that when you see what we are doing, like the names that you talk about, when someone says, "Benjilandam, can you hide from God?" I remember like something like what the book of Ecclesiastes says: there is nothing hidden under the sun.
That's right.
Yeah, it ties into us that there is nothing new that you are bringing to us. Maybe what you are bringing is only the orientation, which is not the orientation towards Christianity. Thank you, Your Highness. You can move on.
Yes, and of course, the first people who came to evangelize us believed that we were like a tabula rasa.
Yeah, empty.
We didn't know anything. But when we, in the new evangelization, when we brought up all these things, then those people sent by Kiara for evangelization, they were now able to know that, no, we were not what people thought we were.
Yeah.
And of course, Kiara has this way of looking at people that you have got to make yourself one. Whatever they are eating, you eat it with them. Wherever they are sleeping, you sleep there with them. So her kind of people were completely different sort of people. You know, people from maybe 12 nationalities living together, and no one ever pointing a finger at the other, because it's a life of unity.
Exactly.
Yes,
I'd like us to move a bit further. You talked about living among the people, eating what they eat, and sleeping where they sleep. And this brings me to also at the turn of the century, with the introduction of a new evangelization. Now, we witnessed that the Focolare Movement in particular kind of seemed to have broken out of their cocoon and began a greater engagement with the community. I remember when the mother of Mirak died, that's Mbita Song, and we went there. Throughout the whole night, there was a folkloric choir also singing their own songs at night, just as other relations who came with choir to mourn for the night. So this again is a different dimension, of engaging the community, so that the community is able to understand. So I don't know if you can talk further on that.
Yes, you talked about breaking their cocoon. I don't think it is that. When they first came, when Kiara sent them out, Kiara told them, you are only to watch and listen, and not talk.
Okay.
So they spent, and in that way, they were studying the way we react to situations.
Okay.
Because if they were to talk, they probably would say an odd word. Now, having made themselves one with us and seen that we accepted them, because if somebody died and people were crying, they joined in crying.
Yeah.
And all that. They participated in all the things without talking. Eventually, they got to know that they had won our hearts. We had accepted them like our brothers and sisters. And that is how those of us who embrace the life, if we had anything like wake keep, they all went for the wake keep. And if we had, and they even made a dance. You see, in the celebration of the 25th anniversary of the coronation of Fontem Jifwa,
yes,
I handled the restoration with them. That means feeding the people.
Yeah.
It was the Focolare Movement who were there, members. They wore aprons. They were serving people with smiles and not looking at someone's face before giving them a plate like some of our people would do.
Yes.
Going round and picking other things that have been dropped around. And then they had their own dance during the cry-die of when the late Pon Fontem Jifwa joined the ancestors.
Yeah.
Yes, they had their asamba. And when they had their asamba, they didn't just wear their trousers or their skirts. They dressed exactly
in the full traditional regalia.
In full traditional dress. And some of them were members of the asamba group.
Okay.
And our people found this really intriguing. And of course, some of them were given traditional titles. Dr. Tim, for example, was Nkem and Umbong.
Okay.
Yes. Miss Pia, who died, was Mafua of Chief Fochap. And of course, Kiara Lubig herself is Mafua
Fontem, yeah.
Crowned by the Mafua Fontem.
In collaboration with the fund of Fonjumeto. And
yes.
And of course, with
and the other funds.
In consultation with the other funds.
With the other funds of the BLM.
Exactly.
Yes. So, I remember someone remarked when the mother of one of our members died at Lekong.
Okay.
And the Capuzona, the lady who was in charge of the women section, walked from the Mariapolis Center right to Lekong and spent the night. You know how our cry-die nights can be.
Yes.
She too was there, and she too slept there.
And you can imagine the cold days of Lekong.
That's right. And this was an elderly Italian woman. So when they talk about making themselves one, it is not just something that they preach, it is something that they do. And for anything to be authentic, it has to be done and not just preached.
And not just preached, exactly.
Yes.
Now, I'm still having the urge to take you back.
Yes.
Yeah. When I used to take part at Mass, one of the things that struck me and which probably made me feel more connected to the liturgy used to be like the Nchendro. That's this calico dress that is used to dress the altar, and also the lechere. The gong,
yes,
that used to be played during consecration of the Blessed Sacrament. So, could you comment on these other aspects?
Yes, on very big feast days, you know how Nronchen is very expensive to us and very valuable.
Yeah.
On very big feast days, the altar is adorned with that. And I tell you, the curious thing about the use of the gong, lechere, at Mass.
Yes.
Once on a feast day, Fontem Lefang was invited to the church in Bel-Air. And at the elevation of the host and the chalice, when everyone knelt down at consecration, the whole church was dead quiet.
Quiet, yeah.
And then when the chalice was, the host was elevated, the bell, the altar boys sounded the bell. The mass servant sounded the bell. And then the old catechist said, "My Lord and my God." Then the chalice was elevated, and he did the same thing in that silence. So the phone asked, why is it that at that part of the Mass, everyone is quiet except when the bell rings?
Yes.
And they explained to him that was the most sacred part of the Mass, because at that time, Jesus is coming among the people, and the bread and wine are no longer ordinary bread and wine, but they are transformed into his real body and blood. So, by ringing that bell, they are announcing that here is Jesus coming in the midst of you all.
Okay, that's interesting.
And the phone said, and Jesus is God. It's just like when I leave the palace and I'm going somewhere, you sound the gong, isn't it? And he said, yes. He said, I will give a gong that will be played during consecration
to welcome
in replacement of the bell. And he gave the gong, and he gave several other gongs. And that was the beginning of his own inculturation.
And we are talking about something. Object. We're talking about something before 1982, because Fontem.
Oh yes.
Yeah, Fontem transcended to his ancestors in 1982. So we are talking about something.
Long,
something that happened
that was long
a decade
before
2000, when the inculturation
that was
long excited.
Yes, that was long before 1982.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we see. So what we are seeing, what from the discussion we have in here, I tend to realize that we cannot just put a date and say, oh, at the turn of 2000s, or Pope John Paul II visited Cameroon. The last visit was 95, I think 95 or 96, when he declared, when he declared the Ecclesia in Africa, in Yaoundé.
Yes.
Yes, and then the official introduction of inculturation, after the bishops of Africa had met in what they call the Synod of Africa. But we see that even then, the movements were already in place from the what you explained. So what I tend to see here is that the official proclamation of the Pope encouraged and emboldened priests and bishops who might have still been reluctant to embrace this way of evangelizing, to realize that it is not wrong.
That is true. And even as that encouraged them, I would like to tell you that I have more problems convincing some of our priests about the song and the dance that I do in church than I have convincing the white priests.
Okay.
Take for example, you know that before we learned more about God, whenever somebody died in the Bama land, people would cry and cry and cry and ask why the person died, and they will never stop crying. But eventually, as we got to know more about God, even though it exists, the concept of death exists in our culture, that you cannot escape death. For example, we say Mbengamina, long. Death is Mbengamina. Okay. So, even as we know that, no one wants their person to die. And when their person dies, they would cry and continue crying.
Yeah.
So, eventually we got to know that, no, it is the will of God that the person should die. Then, I coined songs from the new evangelization to explain all this. That it is God who sent him to earth, it's God who brought him back, who asked him to come. And
Highness,
so,
can you sing one of the songs?
Okay. Okay, there's this song, that is very common.
Okay.
Tem chagalak, oh, tem chagalak, bữa phòn giá là cơ dầm tem chagalak, oh, tem chagalak, bữa phòn giá là quê, tem chagalak, oh,
tem chagalak,
phải mua ghen từ dương bé, tem chagalak. Tem chagal aya no ngasi ni le tem chagalak ye chagen guan ji ye tem chagalak tem chagan dan ji ye de long ba tem chagalak Dem chaga ye chaga ngwan chatenda me dem chagalak dem ya mo wo chatandam la ke zam dem chagalak. Dem ye wales chicken dumbo dem chagalak. Dem anos and dem male tunga yingong dem chagalak. Dem chagalak. Dem zungwele mazen dahayi dem chagalak. Okay, so I go into that song and I teach what Kiara calls the art of loving.
Yes.
I go there and I say, okay, now that you cannot ask God anything because it's God who has taken him back, yes. I have got something to ask you. And what is that? And what I have to ask you is, do you live your life the way God commanded? And what is that way? And then I give Kiara's art of loving.
Exactly.
I will love everybody. Be the first to love. I will love you as you love me. I will see Jesus in the other person. It is the love of God. I will love my enemy. And when I make yourself one, that means when I'm smiling, you smile with me. When I'm crying, you cry with me. This is how this love will become reciprocal. Exactly. And then, after that, when I start blowing the whistle, the masquerades come out. Now, I had a big problem explaining this thing of the masquerades to our own priests. They say, why masquerades in church? I said, look, the Bangwa culture respects a lot of the masquerades, the mask dancers,
yes.
because that's the most beautiful part of the dance. If you cannot give the most beautiful part of the dance to God, then why do you celebrate it in the arena?
That's the question.
It is the most beautiful part of the dance because they are so beautifully dressed and everyone admires them and their steps are graceful. So, right. I introduced this as an aspect of inculturation in the Bangwa area.
Which ties in with the gospel teaching that give your best to God. Because if we remember the story of Cain and Abel, it is because one brother gave his best to God, while the other brother brought something very mean to God.
That's right.
Yeah, if we remember the story of Abraham and his only son, it is because he gave his only son, which was the best thing for him as an old man who could not have another son. So what you're doing is to tell us that what we have in our dance forms, which represents the apogee, as we can say, it represents the most beautiful moment. Why not use it to honor God?
That's right. That's right. And I've done it. And I've done it in cried eyes, in funeral masses, and it's been beautiful. There are many priests who love it. And I know a priest, the parish priest of Azi Parish, every time he came to say a mass, he always said, Mami Mafua, you have to sing Temchagalat. And it has to be, the cultural aspect of this mass has to be carried out.
Exactly.
He always insisted that. There are many priests who like it, but there are others who say, we don't understand. We don't understand.
Yeah, they definitely would not understand. But also, you know that, just as we were talking a moment ago, that the teaching was the first Christian teachers sought mostly to bastardize African culture. So most of us have grown up with this bastardized vision, or what we can say, demonized vision of African culture. So when you bring it, that's part of our subconsciousness. It's already coming up and rebelling. No. That's demon. You know, you need to do a lot to teach them, to open up their minds to realize.
That's right.
And from the song you were singing, while you were singing, another song something was ringing in my mind, because we see here now that also from the narratives you've told all through, what another conclusion that I tend to draw is that before the coming of Christianity, the idea of the word of the word after this word existed in our culture, but also it was separation. Even though we knew that we'll meet our ancestors after when we die too, but you tend to, when you listen to Ajab that they sing, it is all a song of dejection. But
yes,
but then when I listen to choir, I hear songs like Teens Away, Teens Away.
That's right. That's right.
So it shows that Christianity is kind of reorienting us to realize that death should lead us to embracing God, should lead us to meeting God. Yes, to meeting God.
That's right.
Which means that the less mourning and more reflection on what our own eternity will be.
Yes, and Christianity is not only just orienting us, it is also teaching us that if you clear your road very well, you are going to go and meet God. If you decide not to clear your road well, then you are going to get missing.
Exactly.
Yes.
So the question of personal salvation.
Yes. And then, of course, another song again, which talks about death. We say, "Oh,
yeah.
You can imagine.
Yeah, exactly.
That's right. You can imagine. It is from learning more about God and being Christianized that we have come to coin these songs.
Yes.
Incorporate these songs.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. Because in fact, when you listen to Ajab, and that was how Ajab was structured to cause this feeling of dejection, to cause this feeling of a complete desolation. But when you look into choir, choir now takes us away from that desolation into trying to create a feeling of hope, if I may say.
Yes, but there is still a place for that lagu.
Exactly.
Take for example the one that was composed by Nkamacha for me.
Yes.
Where he enumerates all the sadness that I've gone through. I say that there is still a place for that because when you are bereaved and you do not shed those tears, you get choked.
Exactly.
It is by enumerating all those that you shed those tears and your heart becomes lighter.
Yes, it becomes lighter.
But once you have shed the tears, you do not then linger on. That is the difference between what we were before and what we are now.
Yes.
You shed the tears and then straight away you let it go.
So we can say that it was a kind of a traditional way of what we can call trauma healing, you know.
Yes.
And what I see in this Ajab that we are talking about is this ability for it to control also your crying, because like when people are singing and swaying side to side, it's also a way of gradually, because when they do that and then finally they feel that everyone has cried enough, the person that is singing, someone taps the person on the shoulder, and then and then the person will stop. So we are not by this comparison trying to say that one is superior to another, but what I try to bring out is to show that because I have actually had discussions with people who don't want to see choir, and I'm trying to tell them that no, I think both choir and the old way of mourning are necessary. They are necessary parts of our culture.
Yes, they are necessary.
If you go to other parishes, for example, out of Libialem, or even in some parishes in Libialem where there are diocesan priests who are running it, where they too may have different ways of implementing it. But I just wanted to understand the unique position of the Focolare movement. They have a unique advantage in the way that they can introduce new evangelization in our area, probably as opposed to the diocesan priest, who may also be operating in other parishes?
The way the Focolare Movement does it is so different because, first of all, Kiara has this thing of inculturation. She has this school, Inculturation of the Focolarina.
Yes.
So, Inculturation of the Focolare. I told you before that they have a school in Nairobi, in Kenya.
Yeah.
Yes, and they carry out research on the different aspects of life in all parts of Africa, and they have published books on them.
Okay.
And they are people who live practically. They are not just people who preach.
Exactly.
So if you are living something in a practical way, it's different from someone who is standing there and preaching.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. I will tell you, see, during this crisis, many of our people who are in the crossroads have been helped only by some of those Focolare priests who were in Fontem, who from time to time send money to help X, to help Y. You know, they still feel that they are part of these people. They see them suffering, and they are helping them. You know, because they had made themselves one with them, and they knew that if those people are hungry, it means that they themselves are hungry.
Exactly. I'll leave the last word to you if you have any other thing to say. Otherwise, I think we've exhausted our discussion.
No, I'm still amazed that you chose to interview me on this when there are several other people who could even have interviewed a priest about it. But you chose to interview me, so I can only thank you.
And I must thank you too for I must thank you for creating your time.